So continuing on with our UV basics, let's look at some of the ways that we can start applying UVs to an object. So we've already looked at some of the primitives in Maya and the fact that these already have a UV layout on them. Some better UV layouts than others. So we've said that the cube itself has quite a good layout on here actually. If we're looking at these squares, they're evenly sized and they're all square. They're not stretched at all over this area here. So one of the first ways that we can actually apply UVs is by using projection methods. So essentially projection is what we can do is we can project, almost like projecting an image or a projector screen. We can project something onto our object, and depending on the projection method and the object, we can have little or extensive success, or we can have no success at all. It really does depend on the situation. So over here in our UV toolkit, under this create menu, we have these sets of options which allow us to add UVs onto an object or onto a mesh. And the three that I'm really looking at here are this planar, the cylindrical and the spherical. These all have common tools or common controls over them. The only thing that differs is the actual shape, or the projection shape of each one. So the most basic is the planar. Let's click on this. So what we're doing with the planar, just focus on this, is we're actually projecting our UVs onto the surface from, in this case, this is the x-axis. So what we have on this, where the UVs are being projected on, we get really, really good UVs. And the same, this kind of goes through, it projects through the entire mesh. So we have the same on the back. But you'll notice that on the sides here, we're not really getting any UV information on these. So what it's doing is it's taking where it left off from the projection on the front of this. And then once it gets to this point, it's stretching out those UVs over the entire surface. If you were to take this into a 2D application such as Photoshop, we'd only essentially be able to create a texture on the front and the back of this object, this mesh. The rest of the texture would just stretch out like this has done over the sides and the other faces of our mesh. So we can control some of this in terms of the sizing of these checkerboards, these squares. Over here we have access to our Y and our X axes. So if I go over these, I can start scaling these out or start scaling these in. Again, as we said in the last tutorial, notice that as we're doing this, we're changing the aspect ratio of the UVs compared to our original mesh. So whereas we had a perfect square here, we're now changing these into a rectangle. So you can see that the UVs are stretching out. But we can do this on this axis and we can do this on this. So we have that ability to be able to stretch those or resize those. Can also move these as well, can move these UVs around in the UV window. I'll talk more about this area in another tutorial, but just so you can do that. And we can also click on this blue line here. If I click on that, we actually get access to a rotation gizmo in there as well. Okay, controls at that. Actually though, once the UVs are applied, so in this case through the planar map, we can use our W, E and R tools to do the same kind of thing there. So without that gizmo, I can still do a similar thing. Okay, I can do that with my move tool. I can move these around. On my rotate tool, I can rotate these. Okay. So we have that ability there as well. Another way to control these, just clicking back on the planar map, is we have this little T down here. So with that, if I click on that, we also get a transform gizmo in the middle. So this is kind of like the one you get with if you're using the extrude tool and other tools. This is all the transforms in one gizmo. So here we have our move, we have our scale, and if I click on this little blue circle around this, we have our rotate there as well. We can rotate that around. Okay, and you'll notice I'm rotating this, I'm actually changing the projection angle on this. So now as I rotate this round, I'm essentially projecting now from the y-axis. So you can see the UVs on the top and the bottom are fine, but we're stretching out now over the other surfaces. Just reset that. So that's the planar projection. Let's look at now. Excuse me. If you can't apply a projection, by the way, sometimes if you are in, say, UV mode on this, if I click on this, you actually get an error down here. We can't put a planar projections or any of these projections onto a UV selection. We need to be in either a face selection or in object mode. So back into object mode, let's look at the cylindrical. So same kind of thing. What this is doing is this projecting around the surface, but this time it's using this cylindrical line to project onto the surface or the mesh. So around the sides of this, it's projecting okay. We're still getting some stretching on that, but notice on the top and the bottom, it's pretty appalling. So this really does depend on the type of mesh you're working with. So let's just come out this as an example and let's go onto a cylinder. It's much better for this kind of thing. So let's just isolate that. So with this, let's add our cylindrical wrap. And you can see that actually, let me just undo that. This is what we had before. If I put my cylindrical wrap on, you see now actually it's doing a better job of this. And again, if you just look here at the aspect ratio of this, let's undo this again. So this is the original one. See, this is really kind of squashed in. If I put my cylindrical projection on, see, then this is now stretching this out. So it approximates this much better. But again, we are getting this problem that the top and the bottom face of this are absolutely appalling. And these faces, or even these triangles here, this is where these are being represented here. So you can see we can't actually see those flattened out. If we were to take this into Photoshop, again, we'd be able to put a texture on the sides, but we wouldn't be able to put one on the top and bottom. We would just make a complete mess of that. So again, something to be aware of. So similar to the planar map, planar projection, we have all our scale options within here. We have our X and Y scale. Actually, if I scale this a bit more, we kind of get these a bit more square. We have our move on these as well. And again, we have our rotation that we could rotate these round. And similarly, we have our little T down here. And we could go into our rotate on this, and we could rotate this. So if you were putting this into a cylinder that was rotated a different way, if it was rotated at an angle, we could rotate this round to get the best fit on there. So a similar kind of thing. Okay, going to apply this again. If I'm controlling the x-axis on here, actually, one of the things to note is that this sort of wraps around. You can see, oh, if you can see that, but this is pulling this to create a full cylinder around the entire object. But actually, if I do that, that is stretching the UVs out. So if you want to get these exact, you might want to bring these out a little bit, but there's still a little bit tweaking to do on that. So if I was doing that, I could tweak those out, but then what I would have to do is scale these out here as well to try and get these to be perfect squares. So you can't really just work on the projection maps themselves. You do need to tweak them around a little bit to get exactly the right results. So that is our cylindrical projection. So our last one is our spherical projection. So if I put this on a cylinder, again, you can see this. Oh, well, again, it's difficult to see in blue. Let me just switch this off for a second. You can kind of see this a little better. So we have a cylinder now. So this is using all of this area around here to project the UVs onto this surface. And from the sides, it's not doing a bad job. But again, as this is going to the top, you see how this is coming to a point here. And if we look at the checkerboard again, it looks terrible. So as I did with the other one, let's try applying this to a cylinder. A sphere, sorry. So there's our sphere. These are the UVs we've got. Let's apply a spherical. Make sure I'm in object mode. Let's apply a spherical projection on this. And you can see that it brings it in a little bit. And it does a little bit of a better job on this. But still not a brilliant job. So let's try playing around with this a little bit. So we're getting the squares more square. But you can actually see on here that it's giving us all kind of problems within this. I never really use a spherical projection. Sometimes a cylindrical projection may get you some other way, but in terms of the spherical, never really found a use for it. It doesn't work well over a cylinder. There's much better ways to actually unwrap something like that. But just to show you all the tools that you can use on this. So those are the three projection methods: our spherical, our cylindrical, and our planar map, and all the ways that we can actually deal with those. So I'll leave this tutorial here, and in the next one we'll look at how you can actually use multiple projection maps to get better results.